Out-of-control forest fires are frequently in the news, but not all fires are created equally. Wildfire season can lead to a phenomenon known as zombie fires. Here to explain what that is Jennifer Baltzer, who has been studying the effects of these fires in the Northwest Territories. She is the Canada Research Chair in Forests and Global Change and Associate Professor in the Department of Biology at Wilfrid Laurier University. Welcome to our studios.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so when someone reads zombie fire, when I'm reading zombie fire, I have some images in my head of branches and roots pushing out of the dirt and just climbing, coming for people. That is not exactly what it is. So I'm hoping you can explain what exactly is a zombie fire.
Yeah, so a zombie fire, it's a really interesting fire behavior where a fire starts in one season. So fires start in the summer, it burns through that summer and smolders in the soil and in the tree roots through the winter. So the fire actually burns underground through the winter and then comes back to life the following spring. So it reignites early in the spring before we have conditions that would normally lead to fire ignition. So before a lot of active lightning starts.
Now, there are some other names for zombie fire as well.
Yeah.
What are those?
So overwintering fires, so that really describes this behavior. They're fires that spend the winter below the snow, in the soil, smoldering away, and also holdover fires. So we have holdover fires that can ignite in the summer and go dormant during the summer and reignite in the summer. So those are also holdover fires. So this is a specific type of holdover fire that actually goes dormant or smolders in the soil through the winter and then comes back to life in the spring.
All right, let's talk a little geography. Where are we seeing these zombie fires and these types of holdover fires?
We're seeing these fires throughout the boreal biome. So what we're seeing happening is when we're having these really large, unprecedented fire years, and we hear about these in the news all the time, record-breaking fire year, these large fire events that can lead to really catastrophic outcomes. These are years where we tend to see a lot of this overwintering fire behavior. So hot, dry summers that lead to long fire seasons that burn into the fall and can lead to this overwintering behavior. And so this can happen throughout the boreal. And so it really is dependent on the fire year. So when you have a location that's having a big fire year, it's very likely that you're going to see this overwintering behavior afterwards. So in 2020 and 2021 in Siberia, we saw a lot of overwintering behavior because these were huge fire years. So it tends to be associated with these hot, dry wildfire events that can happen throughout the boreal biome.
All right, I'm going to ask you for another definition. Boreal biome. What is that exactly and where is that?
Yeah, so basically, if you imagine the planet, there's sort of a crown of green around the top of the planet. There's a band of forest. So we here in Ontario, in southern Ontario, we live in the temperate zone. As you move further and further north, you start to transition to forests that are more dominated by evergreen trees, like you can imagine your Christmas tree. So trees that retain their needles all year round. And so then we're shifting into this boreal biome, which is really dominated by evergreen trees. It's characterized by thick peat soils that store about 30 to 40% of the carbon, of the terrestrial carbon on the planet. So it's this amazing ring of forest that's the largest intact forested biome on the planet.
So I want to get an understanding of how does one identify a zombie fire versus a regular forest fire?
Right, so when we think about a regular fire, it's a fire that burns through a single fire season. So a fire season typically goes from about June, when lightning ignitions start to be quite active. This is a typical ignition source in the boreal, to around the end of August or early September, when we start to have shorter days, longer nights, more precipitation, these things that sort of slow the fires down that are on the landscape. So when we identify a zombie fire or an overwintering fire, the way we identify that is these very early spring flare-ups before we start to have ignitions from other sources. So these are fires that started in one summer and then overwintered, and that very early ignition in the spring gives us a clue, and its proximity to the edge of a burn from the previous summer. So this is how we can identify these on the landscape.
How early are we talking about? Are we talking like in March and April?
Typically in May,
okay.
in early to mid-May, we'll see these fires flaring up once the snow has disappeared from the landscape.
All right. I want to ask a little bit about the impact these fires have on forests. We're talking about the boreal biome, large swaths of forest, but what's the true impact of zombie fires on forests?
So I guess the short answer to that is that we don't really know. These have not been, although we've known about overwintering or zombie fires for a long time, they haven't really been a big priority from a management perspective because they've typically, you'd have them reignite in the spring. They wouldn't tend to spread. And so from a management perspective, they've not received a lot of attention. With climate warming, we're seeing conditions that lead to more of these fires occurring on the landscape, more of these zombie fires occurring on the landscape, and springtime conditions that can support spread of the fire once that reignition happens. So they're becoming more of a concern for forest managers. And so this past summer, my team, myself and my collaborators, we managed to get into some of these zombie fires for the very first time in collaboration with our partners in the government of the Northwest Territories. To start to collect data to evaluate the impacts of these fires on forest ecosystems. There are some things that we can expect. So because these fires start in one summer, burn, smolder in the soil through the winter, and then reignite the following spring, we expect to see greater carbon losses. So again, these soils in the boreal hold tremendous carbon stocks. And when you have fires that burn through, particularly smoldering fires in the soils, a lot of carbon is released.
You talked about the Northwest Territories.
Yes.
I'm curious about why specifically that area.
So my home university has a partnership with the government of the Northwest Territories. And so we work really closely with the government in the Northwest Territories. For the zombie fire research, 2014 was a really, from a Canadian perspective, was a really massive fire year. In the Northwest Territories alone, we saw about 2.9 million hectares of forested land burning. And so those are the kinds of conditions that lead to a lot of zombie fires. And indeed, this is what this was detected. We were able to pick up on a large number of zombie fires that happened in conjunction with these large fire complexes from 2014.
All right. You talked about I know in 2014, where you guys were set up in base, and I sort of asked about the impacts of forest fires. What's the impact of these fires in terms of surrounding communities as well?
Yeah, so a big fire season like 2014 has a huge impact on the communities in the north. So in 2014, a lot of the fires were really close to communities, and so the smoke from those fires had a huge impact. I was living up there with my family at that point, and there were many days where we couldn't take the kids outside to play. The air quality was so bad. And many Canadians, particularly in Western Canada, have experienced those kinds of really just overwhelming smoky conditions that make it hard to do anything outside. And so that's one immediate impact. In 2014, there were also evacuations from communities where fires come too close. So when we have really close linkages between kind of what we call the urban wildland interface, where you have communities proximal to forests, this is where we can have challenges with fires encroaching on communities and leading to a need to evacuate those communities. The 2014 fire season also led to road closures into Yellowknife. So Yellowknife is the capital of the Northwest Territories, and the roads in and out of the capital city were closed for a couple of weeks at a time, meaning that restocking couldn't happen for food, for example. People couldn't get in and out. People would be stuck on one side of the highway closure. And this often happens with big wildfires as well. These fires jump the highways. They cause conditions that are too smoky to drive through. You can think of a really thick pea soup fog day, and the smoke can be thicker than that, right? So driving conditions can be quite dangerous.
With that being said, not all fires are bad fires. And what I want you to hopefully explain is, many people may not realize that, but forest fires are actually important for our ecosystem. How come?
So the boreal forest has been shaped by fire. Fire is a critical part of that landscape. Fires burn through, so where I work, fires burn through every 80 to 100 years. These are really essential for the renewal of the forest. So fires burn through, they kill the older trees in the stand, they allow for regeneration, they open up the understory, allowing the shrubs and the herbs in the understory to really be quite productive. It changes the age structure and the stand structure at the landscape. So having that sort of heterogeneity or that variability in forest age and forest structure is really important important for various wildlife species. Different species of wildlife use different ages of forests, and so having that complexity at the landscape scale is really essential. And so these fires are really, an important part of the boreal forest, and indeed, many plant species have quite amazing adaptations to allow them to thrive in the face of fire and replace themselves after fires. So even though we often think of fires as being, a very damaging agent, in these fire-adapted ecosystems, it's really quite essential that fires burn through.
All right, I want to get into some of your field work because I know that's where you love to be. You provided us with some pictures. Let's get our first picture up. So looking at this photo, what are we looking at?
We are looking at, the zombie fires that we were able to visit in the Northwest Territories last summer, all of them were very remote locations, so we had to access all of them by helicopter. And so what we're looking at is a picture that I took from the helicopter as we were flying over a site that had experienced a zombie fire. And what we're seeing is all of these large trees, and so those trees would be about 30-centimeter diameter at breast height.
Okay.
And so those are all trees that are completely flattened. So all of the trees have fallen over in this particular picture. And this was a common feature of these sites. When we would fly in, we would be able to see them from a distance because they were we had all of the remote sensing data with us in the helicopters, and so we were able to identify where in the landscape we were looking for these locations. And every time we'd fly up to one of them, we'd see that kind of situation where the trees were all down. And when we got onto the ground, we could see charring on the underside of the stems as well, which suggests that those trees either fell down during the first fire event or as the fires were smoldering over winter and fell, and then fire burned through that particular site again the following spring. All
right, we have a second photo, and it's quite beautiful actually, but this to a fire has been here because we're looking at fireweed, correct?
So fireweed is it's a really beautiful early successional species that comes in really quickly in the first year after fire. In this particular picture, it's again a picture of many, many stems kind of layered on top of each other. So this was a really typical way for these sites to look, having all of the stems down on the ground, having lots of tall fireweed growing up around them. So this was a really common, we could see this from the air as well. Many of our sites, you could see the stems down. You could see all of this tall fireweed, which was very, was unusual compared to the single season fires.
Do you have an idea of when that fire took place?
Yeah, so that fire, both of those pictures were fires that started in 2014 and reignited in 2015.
All right. We have one last photo, and I think I get an idea of what you were talking about, sort of showing that you're sort of looking at the charring from under. Is that what we're looking at here?
Yeah, so in that picture, I am reaching into the stem of a tree. And so what we found, this was actually probably the biggest surprise from the field work. We were expecting to go into these stands and have most of them be peatland forests, so forested peatlands, where you have thick peat soils and kind of, a lot of people refer to these forests as muskeg, sort of small black spruce, thick peat soils, boggy conditions. In fact, when we got into many of these sites, we found that they were fairly productive, drier, kind of more upland forests, and that much of the smoldering was being supported by the roots, by combustion of the roots and combustion into the stem. And so in that picture, I'm reaching up into a stem that's been hollowed out by fire as that fire smoldered over the winter in those trees. And so, even just identifying what parts of the landscape these zombie fires happen, we just don't know a lot about this fire behavior. And so being able to identify the landscape positions where these fires are happening was, kind of an exciting piece of the research that we were able to identify right off the bat.
I want to talk about zombie fires closer to home here in this province. As we talked about the boreal biome, a large swath of the north of this province is that. How much of a problem are they here?
Well, so Eastern Canada typically has a longer fire return interval than Western Canada. So Eastern Canada has a wetter climate compared to Western North America. And this is why we see, a forest to forest transition, temperate forest to hemiboreal to boreal compared to the prairie directly into boreal forest in the West. And so the fact that we have wetter conditions here, we haven't seen as much of an increase in fire activity in these kinds of, really massive fire events that we're seeing in Western North America, that we're seeing in Siberia yet. The prediction is that, even Eastern Canada is going to see drying associated with climate warming as we continue on with our warming trajectory. And so we expect to see these, where we have large fire events happening in Eastern Canada, we would expect to see similar behaviors where these overwintering fires could take hold and smolder through the winter. So again, if you've got fires burning late into the fall that promote smoldering really taking hold, those are conditions that can lead to this overwintering fire behavior. And so certainly that, there's lots of opportunity for that to happen here in Eastern North America, where we have lots of boreal forests, also lots of peatlands. If depending on where you are, that may play an important role.
In terms of the research that you've done in sort of the regions in Canada, are we seeing more zombie fires than ever before, or is this something that it's just so sort of new in terms of coming across this?
No, fire managers have known about this fire behavior for quite a long time, but it hasn't been a big concern because it hasn't, the fires have not tended to spread too much in the spring. So they'd overwinter, but not really manage to spread or do too much damage the following spring. I think certainly with the increase, so we're seeing overall across the boreal an increase in burned area. We're seeing more of these kind of very severe fire seasons where we have deeper burning, longer fire seasons. And so because of that, we expect to see kind of a higher frequency of these zombie fires in the landscape. And so being at a point where we're starting to figure out what the implications of that are before they become, potentially become a problem is a really important step forward.
I think here in Ontario specifically, when we've had record years of fires, we worry about what the next year is going to be. And correct me if I'm wrong, here in this province, we've done a pretty good job of managing our fires. Is there an issue at all with over-management of forest fires?
Yeah, so I think it's become pretty clear. We are very effective across Canada, across North America at managing fires and suppressing fires. And I think we have come to realize that when you are too good at suppressing fires, this can lead to problems where you build up too much fuel on the landscape, and then when a fire does burn through, it becomes a much more serious event than if the regular fire season had been able to be to happen.
What do you do in that case? What is if there are fires and sort of is the management process need to be looked at differently in terms of how we do that?
Well, so different parts of Canada manage fires quite differently, and it really depends on. In the Northwest Territories where I work, there is a let it burn policy. So they monitor fires, but they don't action them until they start to come close to communities or other assets of value. And so, there's the component of protecting important assets on the landscape, protecting human life and human property. Those are all key components of forest management decisions. And so then, where you do have to manage fires on the landscape, I think there's an important role to play for forest management to reduce those fuel loads so then you don't have those catastrophic fires burning through. So certainly we're always going to have to manage fires because we have a lot of people, at these fire, urban wildland interfaces. And, so making sure that your property is, fire smarted, and when we do have to manage for fire, that we are actually helping to reduce those fuel loads. Those are the kinds of directions that I think people are looking toward. There's also in some places reintroduction of prescribed fires, which can happen in times where we know we can control those fires, and so that's another way that people are looking at. Reintroducing fire in a safe way into places that maybe have had a lot of fire suppression.
Talk to me a little bit about your research, particularly in Northwest Territories, with management out there in terms of authorities. How does your research help in terms of forest fire management? Yeah,
so the research we're doing kind of plugs into forest management and fire management in a couple of ways. So there's Following the 2014 fires, there was a big concern from wildlife managers, from forest managers, from fire managers, and from communities about the impact. What would these forests regenerate to? Are they going to recover to something that looks like the forest that we had before the fires? Or do these extreme burning conditions lead to something entirely different? And that has important implications for the way fire will move across the landscape in the future, for the way wildlife interact with the landscape, and for forest management potential. And so a lot of the work we're doing focuses on how these forests are recovering, how quickly they're recovering, what they're recovering to, and then we provide that information to these different management groups to help to support decision making. And so part of what we're doing is also being incorporated into forecasting tools for the region by collaborators who are able to take the information that we collect about the impacts of these kinds of fires on these northern forests and convert it to decision support tools so that different managers can actually have evidence-based tools that provide support for evidence-based decision making.
Very important work. I got to say, very fascinating work as well. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.